In the first phase of risking, you are asleep. What can I tell you, folks? You're just sitting there and you're wondering whether or not things are ever going to be any better. But they're not that bad because you've accommodated. And so you're asleep. Each notion to do something better, each question, is this what I really wanted, is automatically answered by the lessons of your head that you have taught yourself. Oh, things are fine. I'm doing okay. It's like going to a 25th high school reunion and seeing people that you haven't seen, and they ask you about your life. You're going to tell them the truth? It becomes scary. And then you go and you see one guy who was a terrible, nerdy guy, and now he's got a big firm in Silicon Valley, and he's a multimillionaire, and he's still a nerd, but he's wearing a very expensive suit, and you realize, gee, he was really successful, but you know, I never realized it. He's still uncomfortable with himself. He's still unhappy. He still breaks out in a blush from here down to here whenever he talks to someone. Now there are 4 or 5 women who remember him in the class who wouldn't even talk to him years ago, but they know he's worth 9 figures now, so they're really talking to him, and he's like dying. And you suddenly realize that you have grown, and that you wouldn't swap with him for anything. You'd love the money, but you wouldn't want any other part of it because you couldn't stand going through the day the way he goes through the day. I mean, the secretary gives him his mail messages or his telephone notes, and he takes a look like this, and he can't even look her in the eyes because he's too shaken up inside. So you realize things at different parts of your life. One is, you aren't doing so bad, and you have succeeded in taking risks, but the truth is, you've fallen asleep. That's what our life is about. They get us into that home, they get us into that car, they get us into a certain situation, you're spending almost everything you make and a little more, and you're in a situation where you're going full tilt, you don't seem to be making any progress, you don't have time in your life to do what you really want to do, and you're spending less time with your friends. When you're on vacation, it's almost so expensive that it takes 3 days to get into spending the money, and you overspend. Are you relating to what I'm talking about? Life gets pulled so fast by you that when you get back to that home after the vacation, it feels so great just to be in this situation where you can go back to sleep again. So what I'm asking you to do to get out of stage 1 is to wake up. Wake up, but carry the dream with you. What is the dream of your life? Why were you incarnated? Why were you put here? Surely this was not a mistake. You were placed here to do something, to be someone. All the getting comes out of the being. You get all those things that you want in life by being the person that you're supposed to be. No one who ever was fully themselves ever walked around needy, because they were so full of themselves they didn't need a lot. People who didn't become themselves coveted everything that everybody else had. So, what were you put here to be? Are you following a career that someone from birth said, you're going to be like me? This is a family of lawyers, and my granddad built this firm, and you're going to be in it. Or, we're a military family. Or, we've always been in politics. And they lay down the law. Are you living your own life? Are you picking up the fallen standard of a parent because of insufficient funding, intelligence, zeal, or bad breaks or health was unable to carry that banner to victory? Are you vindicating your parents' suffering on your behalf? And are you, by your victory, showing the world that in your success, you are proving to the world that your parent, had they had your opportunity, would have succeeded too, because you're a chip off the old block, so when I win, my dad wins. A lot of us do that. Of course, that backfires on you, because when the relationship between you and your parent goes awry, and maybe you catch on to the game, but maybe too late, and you realize that you were being manipulated into fulfilling their unanswered dreams. You become resentful because you gave up your dream that didn't fit in with their plans. And so subtly, with that hurt that turns to anger, which turns against yourself, you end up punishing yourself by becoming a failure in life at the very thing they gave you the opportunity to be. And so you hurt them deeply. So you have to be for yourself in order to be happy. You have to be for yourself in order to please other people, if that's what you're into. By the way, pleasing other people is why people get stuck in the dream. So what is it that you came over the house to tell me, dear? Oh, you and Harry want to move to Oregon. What's wrong with Maine? You want to move to Oregon. Why? You don't want to move to Oregon. I mean, you'd never be around here. And then you get talked out of those changes and risks by all the people in your environment. In the stage one of risking, people are giving you a lot of pressure and are telling you it's okay to be where you are. I remember I had been working so diligently on, as a matter of fact, it happened to be on a risking project. I've written a book, Risking. I was working on several other things at the time. And because of that, I decreased my private practice, even though to do so was an enormous risk. But what I had to do is I had to gain more knowledge and study the material that I was working with and forge a more cohesive and comprehensive theory of risking and feelings. That's what I was doing. I had to do my own research, and I had no one to pay for it. I wasn't working under a grant. I didn't belong to a hospital. I was a private person doing therapy out of my little home, which was a little farmhouse in suburban Boston, Wayland, Massachusetts. And I said, it's not going to happen here. I need for this method to meet more people. I have to do something. And I looked at the book that I had just written, and I said, you know, this is amazing, because it's up to me to take this risk. So I sold the house. You could sell houses in those days. That was a joke. I sold the house. I paid off all my encumbrances, and with $8,000 in the bank, I had a U-Haul professionally packed, because I wasn't going to get into that. Someone professionally packed a U-Haul. My son and I drove the U-Haul. Actually, he knew more about it than I was, but he was 14, and I had to do the driving. And we towed my wife's old Ford convertible with my Jeep. She drove the Jeep, towing her Ford convertible. As we were leaving the front lawn and about to turn out on the highway, our banker, who had the mortgage in the house, had come by to see this for himself. And he looked up at me. This is a man worth $25 or $30 million. I had $8,000 net worth at the time. And he said, "You're going to California, David?" I said, "That's right, Harry." He said, "The house is mine now." I said, "That's right, Harry." He says, "You don't know anybody out there?" I said, "Right again." He says, "You got $8,000 in the bank?" "I know, because it's my bank, and I checked the balance this morning." I said, "Right." He says, "I'll be damned." He says, "I'm worth $26 million. I have 15 branches of my bank. I have money salted away so that if I don't work another day in my life, I'll have a fabulous income forever." He says, "And I'm looking at you, and I have never in my entire life been as envious of another human being as I am of you at this moment." He says, "You're just getting up and doing it." He says, "Where does it come from?" And I said, "The necessity of knowing what I have to do to win on my terms." He said, "Call me when you've made your first million." I said, "If I called anyone, you'd be first on the list." We've had several conversations since then. He's always amazed that everything worked out. And yet he says at the same time, "I knew it all the time. But in that moment, when he put himself in the position of me driving this foolish van, I mean, it wasn't an easy trip. I mean, there are a couple of filling stations in Pennsylvania where we shattered the thing because I didn't know the height of it. And it was an adventure. And I didn't even have a place to move. I made that happen from the road. But it's possible, because I wasn't risking everything. I was me during that jump. I had a plan. I mean, I didn't know how I would work out the plan, but I had a good idea. And I believed in that dream. And I believed that it was up to me, since it was my idea, to put that risk into action and to go for it. What was I going to do? I could have practiced in Boston and have been easily one of the most successful practitioners in that town. You know, the second week I was in private practice, I had a full practice. I never had to worry about that. I don't know why. It was very easy for me. And I lowered that in order to do my work, and then I gave it all up for something that I believed in. I had no guarantees. I knew it was good stuff because it was my best stuff. That was enough for me. I knew that it was, but I didn't have anyone to say, "That's great, kid. You go and do it." Because I was no kid anymore. I must tell you, the only dangerous thing on that whole trip across, the only thing that gave us any problem whatsoever, was while we were crossing the Mojave, and we tried to do it when the sun was down, we miscalculated our water ration for our Cocker Spaniel, and his nose turned white and gave us the biggest scare of the trip. Other than that, everything went swimmingly. What I'm trying to say to you people is, let's humanize this a bit. You have ideas that are sitting in your head. You have dreams that you want to do something with. But unless you believe that you're the one to make your dream happen, nothing, once more, nothing is going to happen. Why do you think the dream came to you? It was a signal. It was a broadcast from your psyche. Let me explain how that works. Maybe I should tell you how you work as a human being. Everything comes into you from your senses. You smell, you taste, you see, you hear, you comprehend, you integrate. You also have problems and all that, which are based on your defenses, which are leftover ways that you have protected yourself from pain growing up. So there's some distortion. So you are not trusting reality because you know you're a liar. You do, don't you? Yes, yes, yes? Aren't you all liars? Anyone here not a liar? Everyone's a liar, right? You've got to know what you lie about. What you lie about is what you defend about. Hint, dependent people defend about being lovable. Controlling people lie about being vulnerable. And competitive people pretend all the time. So you've got to know what it is you lie about. All right. So the dream is your dream. How do you get a dream? You're taking in all this information all the time. And it suddenly happens that you get an idea. It can be any idea. Gee, what about a fastener that would hold paper in a large ream size together like a paper clip? The new paper clip. You got that idea. And you did nothing with it. You do nothing with it. You got the idea, now finish the idea. You get ideas all the time. Every day of your life, when you are awake, you get ideas. But you don't recognize them and you don't let them in, and the reason you don't let them in is the critical end-all stage of why risking doesn't take place. You have the dream, you need the belief. And you know why it doesn't take place? Because you don't know what to do with the belief. Here's what you do with the belief. You act like a person who would put the belief into action. You just got an idea for a paper clip. I just made this up. I don't know what I'm talking about. A paper clip that'll hold a ream of paper together. I suppose that's valuable today. I don't know. What do you do with that idea? Well, if you act like a person who's used to marketing those kinds of ideas to the stationery business, you go out to the stores and you see what they have in paper clips. You see who's got products like that. You see what the need is. You ask around. It's called conducting a survey, but you do it on your own. And you act as if you're the person with that idea who's about to make $1 million if it's an idea that can make $1 million. And you put it aside or go ahead with it depending on what you think. You have acted like the person who's come up with an idea that's a good idea. That's all you do. That is the difference between people who do things and don't do things. Everybody says they'd like to write for movies. Has anyone here ever thought of writing a film script with hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14 people. All right. 14 people would like to do a film. Have any of you ever thought of an idea, wouldn't that be fun to write a film script? Another 6. All right. The point is, or to be in the pictures, or to be in Hollywood, or something like that. Everybody has ideas like this, but few people act on them. I'm a writer. That's kind of the way I think of myself. I act like a writer. When I get an idea for a book, or an idea for a film script, do you know what I do? I write it down. Because that's the idea of the day. I got an idea for a book during breakfast, an entirely different book. I won't write it, but I know some firm can do it. But I wrote it down, outlined the chapters of the book. It took about 3.5 minutes, half a glass of orange juice and a cup of coffee later, I had the book idea. It may be something, it may not be, but there'll be 3 phone calls that'll check it out. Because it's coming all the time. If I am acting like a writer, then around me, writing ideas are coming at me all the time. I don't need to look for them. They present themselves. I see them from the point of view of a writer. Ever invite a plumber over to your house for a drink? Very expensive to do that, by the way. Why? Why are you all laughing? Why did you start laughing? I said, very expensive to do that. Because he'll go into the bathroom and he'll come out and say, you know, those pipes under the sink are getting a little green, right? Right? Because with the point of view of the person in his position, he's looking for work. He's looking to see how he can apply his craft. His risking is in noticing your need to take something and fix it. And what he does is he puts you in the position of, you know what'll happen if you don't have this pipe fixed and you take that long trip and you come back and there's water leaking through the wall, won't it be a mess? It'll only cost $250 today, but if you put it off, thousands of dollars, weeks of being uncomfortable and miserable in a muddy house. You're convinced, except you're still not going to do it. Right? Because it's still too much sell. What I'm saying, and I'm going to stay here till you get this one, because this is critical. You must assume the point of view of the person who received the dream and believes in it. Without that, it doesn't go to the next step. A little bit more on believing, so you get what I mean, because it's not quite as simple as all that. You have a dream, you have an idea. It's your idea, whatever it is. Stop judging the idea. Just accept that here is an idea. The idea has points against it, and it has points for it. None of these points will prove that it should or should not be. They're just points. You get an idea, you have a dream, it's yours, hold on to it. Now you have to find out, is there some way this idea can become reality? You need to believe that it's possible. I remember when I was first talking about my therapy, and in Boston, long-term, multiple sessions a week was very common. Short-term therapy was just starting to become popular. And I mentioned to a former supervisor who was a psychoanalyst, I said, gee, I've increased the length of the therapy hour to 2 hours, and I'm putting them on tape and giving the tape to the patient. And he goes, what an interesting idea. I wonder why no one's ever done that. What an interesting idea, and you have them study it. He was a mentor. He commented on the idea. My other friend who was a psychiatrist, when I said, what, then if you get into trouble in the session, they'll use it in court against you. I mean, that was his first projection of his own lack of support and feeling about himself. It was his own disbelief in his own worth that made him invalidate the idea, because he saw the idea as a way of getting caught. That's really what we're afraid of believing in, because if we really, listen carefully, if we really take an idea and run with it, the way you're going to get caught is people are going to see your inadequacies. Because you're not good enough to do the idea yet. You don't have enough training, you don't have enough background, you don't have the warehouse, nowhere, you're stuck. You have to get a lot of technical backup information to make things happen. You've got to get a lot of information of other sorts. And what you're afraid of when you're afraid of believing in the idea is not so much the idea, but in yourself as a person who's competent enough to make the idea work. The idea that you get is always a challenge to grow up to be in a state where you are worthy of the idea that you got. Don't you see what it is? You're constantly being flagged to a greater goal, your goal, but you don't know enough, or you haven't been trained well enough. Get the training to make yourself happen. Sure, you got to take courses for certain businesses and learn about marketing and sales and all that sort of thing, but what's more important, when you get an idea about something you want, to follow through on it. I went to school with a fellow who was a gifted oboist, wonderful talent. But he was interested in astronomy. And one of his hobbies was taking photographs through a telescope. And no matter how he set up the telescope, he always found out that his pictures were a little bit blurry because they didn't follow quite right. And he figured out something with a electronic measurement of light, which would amplify the light when it would come in, so that he could make the gauge go to a much broader scale. Instead of measuring from 1 to 10, the scale was measuring from 1 to 1.1. It was like 1,000 times greater scale, so he had 1,000 times more control over it. And he got beautiful pictures. And he did it in a way that was totally unusual. He used mirrors in ways that no one had thought of before, because he didn't know what he was doing. And every step along the way, he found himself taking a course at MIT, learning more about mathematics. This is an oboist. He perfected a technique which, because he didn't know enough about science to know that once you get stuck in an area, you should think along that area, he started thinking in terms of temperature. If a thing could follow something to this degree, could he also measure temperature the same way? And he found a way to measure temperature by light distortion. And now he had a system that could measure variances in temperature as small as 1/1,000,000th of a degree. And when they tested the outer rim of the universe and found the differences in minor temperature, they were using his devices. He made a bloody fortune, but he didn't know what he was doing. All along, he was running scared. But what he wasn't afraid of, it was that he was not afraid of being shown up as not knowing enough. He would simply say, how do you do this? How can I find out about this? And his own curiosity and belief that he had something special caused him to create this whole, he actually created an industry. I'm sure he would have much rather been playing the oboe, but it was a fascinating idea that took him by storm. Your belief needs to lead you to adapt the posture and point of view of a person who is acting the way you would act if you had succeeded in your risk. You want to be boss of your company. I want to tell you how to get there. Look at your job tomorrow morning the exact same way. I assume that your boss is a terrific boss, sensitive, positive, looking for the best out of people, wants the company to expand, is fearless to try new ideas, creative and accepting. Ha, 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 ha. If that's not your boss, you should become your boss, because you become limited by the boss who is not like that to be less than yourself. And whenever you have a boss who's not conducive to your growth, you inhibit your growth just to get along with the boss. And no matter what they're paying you, how much of a price difference is it worth for you to give up the opportunity to grow into your best? Do you see what I'm talking about? You're undermined in a lot of different ways throughout your life. And no way more importantly than your fear that you're not the person to do the job. Tomorrow morning when you go into work, try the following experiment. Imagine that you're that good boss sitting in your own head. A call comes in, or the first thing you have to do, as you do it, ask yourself, am I doing it the way my boss would want me to do that? Just do everything the right way. Stop fighting it. Stop trying to be right. Stop trying to make your way the best. Instead, do it the best way possible. Act with your secretary, act with your superior the way you should act if you were coming from the boss's point of view. And all of a sudden, something will happen to you. You will see the company's greater good as more important. You will start relating to it in a more important manner. You will start being more helpful to the people around you. You will not be an ego who is difficult to get in control with. You will find yourself getting and taking more responsibilities because it's easier to do them the right way the first time yourself than have to correct a difficult person who will not learn. And all of a sudden, people will notice, whether they want to or not, that you're a more helpful person. Ask so-and-so. And gradually, you end up in a situation where you find yourself against irresistible forces that cannot change. And because you have acted so much the better for so long, you have gotten on-the-job training that you were never supposed to get. You've gotten the on-job inner mental training of a person who is seeking to be in control of their own destiny, and then you realize, I can't be that here. And I like the feeling of autonomy that I feel when I act for myself. And I can't be that here. I'm capable of much more. And I have been postponing my time in life, you'll say to yourself. I have been holding myself back. I have been waiting for an opportunity. But when you act in the role and in the point of view of the person you're trying to become, you create the opportunity for yourself before the opportunity appears. Stage 2 of risking is initiating the risk. It has to do with standing forward and deciding that the risk is going to start. I'm going to take a risk. Now, what do I need? It's a stage where you take an inventory. What's missing in my life? What really is missing in my life? How did that happen? Why did I let that develop? Do I need more education? Or do I have too much education that is of absolutely no value to me? And why did I get so much for education that means nothing? I mean, I know an awful lot about the Middle Ages, but what time is it? It's in the 1990s somewhere, I think. I mean, it's wonderful to have all these historical perspectives, but if I want to survive, I have to have education that's pertinent and relative to my risk. I need to have skills that are going to help me maximize my forward motion. I need stuff that's pertinent to my life. I don't need stuff that's prerequisites. I need stuff that helps me develop the confidence of being myself. You know, no matter what educational degree you get, what the degree confers on you in the end is not the knowledge, but the empowerment. Most of you could do psychotherapy, for example, if you were told some simple rules of psychotherapy. The rules of psychotherapy. Try to understand the other person. If you don't understand, ask questions. The questions that you should ask should come from your curiosity. When you understand, repeat your understanding to the other person. Now, if you weren't in your own way, and you felt good about yourself, and you felt loving and kind and generous, most of you have the capacity to be psychotherapeutic. But you go through training and you learn all these other things, but in order to develop that talent, the empowerment of self is the greatest gift that you get, because it's the freedom to act with license. It's the freedom to act as yourself. It's the freedom simply to be yourself without apology or explanation. And that's what we want in life. We just want to be able to be. You know why you hate going over your parents, those of you who hate going over your parents? Because the moment you cross the door, you're 4 years old again, and being told what's wrong with you, that is, what's wrong by their standards. They don't like the way you comb your hair. Whose business is it? You know, the truth is, what other people think of you isn't your business, but when it comes to your parents, because you want love and affection from them, you'll do anything to get it. And when you go over there, you hate what's drawn out in you. You know the person you should be with in your life? Magicians. The people you should be in your life are people in whose presence the best self that you are shows itself. If you are in a relationship with someone with whom you cannot be your best, that relationship is doomed anyway. And I don't need to tell you about it. You can fight me on this one, but it's going to be gone within the next year or so. Because you cannot stand the pain of knowing a better self and not feeling able to be the best you are. As a matter of fact, most relationships die Listen to this, because you know this, but you don't know this. Most relationships die because in order to make the relationship work, you gave up part of yourself to get into the relationship. And it's not just giving up bowling, you know. You gave up part of yourself, a circle of friends perhaps, some autonomy, some freedom of spirit to do what you wanted, like not account for every moment of your blessed life. Oh, I hit a button on that one. And what happens is, the reason a relationship dies is that you get lonely in the relationship. And you know what you're lonely for? You're lonely for the part of yourself that you gave up to make the relationship work. Is there anyone who cannot identify with that? I'm glad, because you're being honest. So in stage 2 of risking, which is the ponderous stage, where you're entertaining what the loss could be, you could be rejected if you tell a person the truth. You could lose your shirt if you made the investment. In stage 2 of risking, you are anticipating everything you need, everything you could lose, and you're deciding whether you really should be taking the risk. You know, sometimes the best risk is not to take the risk. I had a friend of mine who joined me for a late lunch in Birmingham. I don't recall what it was about, actually, at this point. He said, well, I certainly had one of the best business meetings of the year. And I said, well, what'd you have? He said, I told them they could keep their building and I would keep my $75 million. And he was right. That was a great meeting because he made the right decision. And if you can think of it like that, the right decision is the right risk. Sometimes not risking is the best risk, especially when everyone is plowing into you and saying, you got to do it, we're going to all invest together, if it doesn't make sense to you, don't do it. If you don't feel comfortable, you say the magic words, that doesn't feel comfortable to me. That's the only read you get from your consciousness. Your consciousness is this vast collection of all the impressions in your mind that you see, and it comes up with an answer that's usually a feeling. So it says, okay, so we're going to build a house in this plot, it's going to be wonderful. And you say, no, I don't think so. It doesn't feel right to me. Why? It doesn't feel right to me. Next question. You don't need to explain your feelings. You just need to state them. But you have to start stating them. That is the key risk of stage 2. You must state your feelings. This doesn't feel right to me. And also in stage 2, you're asking people, well, how much could I lose if I made this investment? Now, the person who's selling you a phony investment is always going to say, risk? I'm glad you mentioned risk to me. He's got a speech coming. And you can tell because it comes out of this part of the head, not from the heart. You know those speeches? Whenever someone's coming from you from the top of the head, you know how you know you're not listening? You know that it's a lie because you're not listening. You know that right away. And you're waiting for it to be over and you're saying, what is it? You're not listening. You're analyzing. What's this person telling me? So what you say to the person when they start saying that is a simple phrase. And you say, is what you're telling me the truth? Just like that, in the middle of it, and you'll get, and you know, and you say, well, thank you for your interest. I'll think about it, and if I decide, I'll call you. When someone says, there is no risk whatsoever in this, what you need to tell them is, thank you very much. That's the biggest risk I could ever take, because if there's no risk, you're talking about yourself. You're going to take my money and run. The third stage of risking is committing. You've analyzed all the data. You know how many horsepower the car is, and that ping is nothing. They told you, don't worry about it. You're going to make it. You're going to commit to the risk. You're looking for the moment to go into action. How much should you tell other people? You don't tell other people. Why do you want to tell other people what you're doing? Other people wish you well, but not that well. Remember that? And if you tell someone about a risk that you're taking, basically what they're going to do is they're going to be thinking of all the reasons they don't want you to succeed. They're like that. They're spoilers. Also, even if they're for you, and they love you, and you're terrific, the fact that you're taking a risk that they wanted to take and they couldn't take makes them look terrible. I remember one day, I lived in Wellesley, Massachusetts, and I lived in a valley. And one of the things that people on both sides of the street shared was a totally unusable backyard. We had hills. And so we planted them with wildflowers. You know, it's the New England way, you make do. I decided that I didn't want a hill. So I hired a bulldozer, and I had a pickaxe. I was in my residency and not afraid of back-breaking work. I learned better. And I went out there, and I cut down my hill, built a beautiful natural retaining wall and a gorgeous terrace, and I actually put on all this footage onto the property. Fellow across the street walks up to me, puts his arm around me, and says, "Come on, we're going for a walk." I said, "What's the matter?" He says, "You're making us look bad." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You know what my wife is telling me?" I said, "What?" He says, "That hill has got to go." When you take a risk to do what you want, other people look at you and they wonder, "Oh my God, should I be doing that?" And that's what your risk means to other people. It has nothing to do with you. Everybody is in a foxhole. Everybody is selfish. Everybody is thinking about themselves. And you better know that. I don't care where you come from or what you believe in. Everybody's thinking of themselves. And that's correct. And it's only the fools who aren't thinking about themselves who get in so much trouble that they get in your way. The people who are thinking about themselves are doing okay. The people who are not are in trouble. All right, so the people who are going to stick their nose in your two bits in your business are always going to say the wrong thing to you. So you don't tell people what you're doing unless they absolutely need to know. Kids, we're moving to St. Louis. Ah! They need to know. When you tell people what you have to tell them, it should be because they're directly affected by it. But if you're telling a casual acquaintance about it, and you're secretly bragging, and we secretly do that, what you're inviting is the other person to put you down. Because when you're bragging to another person about the risk you're taking, you are, in essence, hurting the other person. You're saying, "I can do this, and you cannot." So the other person says, "What a rotten thing to say to me. I bet it won't work. I know a guy who tried that, and he lost his shirt. You know, the last time you risked, Bill, you just about crippled your whole operation." In other words, the person you're going to brag to has enough knowledge about you to just make you feel that maybe you shouldn't be doing it. Are you all nodding agreement with this? You know what I'm talking about. So keep your mouth shut. We know you're insecure when you're risking, but don't talk to people unless they're directly involved in the risk itself. It's none of their business. And the only thing they're armed to do is to give you trouble. And it's not that they want to give you trouble, it's that when you cut down your hill, he doesn't want to cut down his hill. And now he's got to come up with arguments why he can't cut down his hill. And he can't come up with them. Why do you do these things? The whole question is, you are doing them to achieve success. You risk for success. But the success you risk for should be a success that you define in your own terms for you. It shouldn't be someone else's notion. Whatever anyone else is going to tell you about your success, it is basically a watered-down version of what they would do if they were in your shoes. They don't know your shoes, and they don't know your life, and they don't know you. So people cannot tell you what to do. What you're looking for is a mentor, someone who can teach you, someone you can talk to who really doesn't have an opinion, but asks the right questions. The mentor always asks questions that are a little hurtful, but are presented in a loving way. Is that the best you can do? Do you really want that? Well, you're going to hurt a lot of people if you take that route. Are you aware of that? The mentor asks the same questions you would ask yourself, but you try to brush over them, but the mentor puts those questions in your face. The mentor can be trusted because the mentor doesn't profit by your gain or loss, but is studying you as another person who is alive and risking. You risk for success. Success does not come to you. Success is something that you continually build. When you finish the phase where you're committing and have decided to move ahead, you've decided to go for that element which is necessary to your success. You take all of your energy and you start to gain momentum. The end of the commitment stage, stage 3, is the stage where you have decided to pass and you are waiting for the moment to move. You're measuring the road. You know what you have to do. You are resolved in your intent. You are going to do it. You are waiting for when, and you know that when is not going to look safe. It's going to look hazardous. But you're going to make it safe by anticipating it. An opening's going to be coming up there. I'm going to back up from this sucker, give it some gas, so that I will be already at passing speed before I approach him. I figured out how I can compensate for this, and I've lengthened the road in my own head. You're going to do something at the moment of truth. There's a thing that happens to people, though, who get stuck in this phase of committing. Isn't it strange, you know, how could you get stuck in the phase of committing? You're about to go, and then you're not about to go. Anyone ever been in an on and off relationship? You know exactly what I'm talking about. The other person gave you all the signs that it was going ahead, and then the first thing that went wrong, they pull back. The reason for this is that at the committing stage, you have made a list. Things that could go right, things that could go wrong. You've made another list. Why I want it, why I don't want it. And when you spend so much time making these lists and internal dialogues with yourself about what you want and don't want, you can talk yourself out of the risk. At the moment of commitment, you say, I want it. I know there's a downside. I recognize the downside. I accept that there's a downside. I will prepare for it, but I want this. That means I'm going to make it happen. Then comes the most treacherous moment of all risks. It's a moment that is so scary that merely mentioning it usually stops people from thinking about risking. You could get killed. You could lose your shirt. You could lose everything you own. She'll leave you. What are you talking about? It's the worst case. It's the damage that you could suffer when you take the leap. That's the point of no return. It's when we commit, we decided to do it, and we've hit the gas, and we're in the risk, and we're saying, I'm alone in this. No one else can help me. I've got to make it work, and I have to succeed, and I prepared for it. I know the warning signs of my vehicle if it starts sputtering. I know where to get the extra money if I get into trouble. I'm just going for it. I'm not going to worry about anything but making it work now. That's where my attention is. That's where it's going to stay. And unless I'm diverted by something else, I'm going to keep my attention on this. And anything that seems to be going wrong will get my full attention because it's one of the things on the list that I've been looking for, and I'm going to fix it before it gets worse, and I'm going to keep on risking and going. That's how you save yourself. And that's when it's really scary, because guess what happens? Something always goes wrong. And for the person who's not committed at the point of risk, whatever goes wrong becomes the excuse for backing out of the risk. There will always be a reason for giving up the risk in the middle of the risk. And there's never a reason for going ahead that's as strong or as valid as the belief that you must do it for you. And whatever you've figured out on paper, or how many courses you've taken, or what you did to yourself to prepare yourself, nothing is going to get through except believing in yourself at this point. And unless you're willing to finally give up all the self-doubt at the moment of risk and saying, I deserve it, I'm good, I want this, God, I want this. If you're not willing to say that to yourself and do it, it doesn't happen. And the reason it doesn't happen is because risking is a selection. There are 1,000 paths, and you have said, this is the one I think that will work, I'm almost sure of it, go. All of a sudden you get an obstacle in the path. What do? I was speaking to a young lady who was telling me that having chosen, after 4 or 5 unfortunate relationships, a man that she thought was wonderful, the relationship was worse, it turned out, than any of the others before. She said, I've paid my dues in life. Why are there stones in the road? And I said, because you're looking at it wrong. When you pay your dues in life, there are still stones in the road, except you know they're going to be there. So instead of tripping over them, you're looking and saying, I wonder where the stones in this road are. And that distinguishes successful riskers from people who are just taking chances and whoop and slip and fall on their face. There will always be stones in the road that will be large enough to convince you that you will trip. And if that's how you want to be, you will never take a successful risk. But if you have decided that you're going to get there, so there's a stone in the road, well, we can walk around that one, because you've been planning it. As soon as you have been aware of the fact that it could be there, you say, could that be a stone in the road? Is credit going to get tougher? Will they increase the price of that? Will she really back out on me? And you start thinking ahead of time. Instead of going on faith alone, you go on your smarts. And you don't expect there to be anyone to save you. That's the whole thing about this critical stage of risking. You give up the belief that anyone is going to be there to take care of business for you. You're it. That is a critical point in your life, because unless you know you're it, you cannot save yourself. Unless you know that, there's no possibility that you're going to have the courage to follow through. The fourth stage of risking is a very quick stage. It's there. I mean, it feels like the longest stage because your heart's in your throat, and it's pounding. Your palms are sweaty. You're frightened. And at this stage, all of your attention has to be on the risk. But it has to do, there's a phenomenon of risks, that risks at this stage have a way of getting all your attention. You know, the compulsive gambler goes to the racetrack, the wife's sick at home, the kid's got pneumonia, the bill collectors are all around screaming, right? This guy's got $100 on a nag. When that horse is rounding the track, he's not thinking of any of those things. He's thinking of that horse coming in the last quarter, and now he's down with, you know, it's that whole nonsense. And he's totally there for that period of time. If he could only concentrate on anything else in his life, he wouldn't have a gamble, because life would be a sure thing if he could concentrate like that. But risks have a way of riveting our attention. But reality is about risks. When you see someone doing it for real, it's always attention grabbing, because you know that anything could happen, mistakes could happen. That's what makes life exciting, because mistakes can happen. And it's at this stage, taking everything and shooting, where all the mistakes will happen. The only way you can prepare for success is to know the danger that you're going to be facing, so that you're not surprised by it. Because the anxiety at the risking moment is great enough. Why should it be compounded by the surprise of discovering something even bigger? Are you with me on this? It's really important that you get this, because the reason you have probably backed off from the important risks that you wanted in life was because you didn't plan well enough. You wanted to make it all good. I'll do this, and then I'll do this, and then I'll do this. What about worst-case scenarios, when you sit down and say, well, what could happen if they didn't do this? What's my backup plan? How would I do that if the plane didn't come in then? You have to start thinking like that, so that when you go, you know you have the comfort of the option. Just having the option. But at the point of no return, there isn't an option. The option is to go ahead. And the option is one that you must learn beforehand. You save yourself in the past by hitting the accelerator, not the brake. Because when you hit the brake, you're not in control of the road behind. The only road you control is the road ahead, because you're now crouching out another person behind you. So you save yourself by going ahead. And you have to be prepared to do that. And it's the preparation and the belief and the commitment to going ahead that gives you the power to succeed. Stage 5 is a tricky part of risking, because when you reach it, you feel relief that you got there. But the point is, when you get there, you're in a whole new set of unfamiliar circumstances. You're not where you thought you would be. No matter what you risked for, you always land in a different country. Do you know what I'm saying? Gee, I did it, and I didn't think it would be like this. So you became president of the company, and you finally discover something. Then no one talks to you in a friendly way. It's very lonely being successful. People react to the successful person as if you're a thing. And all of a sudden you feel isolated from other people. And people attribute things to you, because people project onto the successful person the role of authority. And they start treating you the way they think about their father or mother. And all of a sudden you're being dealt with attitudes, and people will address you and say, well, you always have kept us down. I've been in the job for 15 minutes. How could I always have kept you down?